Dad, you understand that we can't take care of you at home anymore, right? My eldest son David's words cut through the chilly December air as we parked in front of Sunset Manor, a nursing home I had never seen before in my life. The SUV's engine was still purring softly, but my heart was beating so loudly that it drowned out every other sound. I thought we were going to spend Christmas together, I muttered, looking out the passenger window at the brick building with discreet signs announcing specialized care for the elderly. We are, Dad, said Jennifer, my daughter, turning from the driver's seat with that forced smile I had known since she was a child. We'll visit you tomorrow, on Christmas. We even brought you some presents. My name is Rob, I'm 75 years old, and I just found out that my 2 adult children consider me a disposable burden. 3 days ago, they showed up at my house in Cleveland talking about special Christmas surprises, and asking me to pack a small suitcase. It never crossed my mind that the surprise would be abandoning me. After my wife Margaret passed away a year ago, I continued to live in the same house where we raised our family for 42 years. It wasn't a mansion, but it had everything that mattered, memories in every room and a backyard that I kept immaculate even in the harsh Midwest winter. That's when I noticed something was wrong. David and Jennifer, who barely called me twice a month, started showing up every week. Always with conversations about how I was getting more forgetful, how the house was too big for one person, how they were worried about my safety. Dad, what if you fall when you're alone? David would insist, exchanging glances with his wife Kelly. What if there's a medical emergency in the middle of the night? Jennifer would add, using that condescending tone that made me feel like a child. I would reply that I was fine, that I still drove, cooked, and took care of the property without any problems. I would show them the tidy yard, the bills paid on time, the well-stocked refrigerator. They would just exchange those looks that I pretended not to see. What they didn't know was that Margaret and I had been meticulous with our finances our entire lives. When she passed away, she left behind a substantial life insurance policy that guaranteed me total comfort. The children never asked about money, and I never mentioned it. Perhaps it was my mistake to trust that love was unconditional. The week before Christmas, David showed up alone with a smile that was too wide. He talked about bringing the family together, about how special it would be to have everyone together after the first year without their mother. We'll pick you up on Thursday, Dad. Wear something nice. We have an amazing surprise planned, he said with an enthusiasm that should have alerted me. I was excited. I packed a small suitcase with clean clothes, my blood pressure medication, a photo of Margaret and me on our honeymoon, and put on my favorite winter coat, the one she gave me on our last wedding anniversary. In the inside pocket of that coat was a lottery ticket I had bought almost without thinking 3 days earlier. The clerk at the neighborhood bakery said, "Mr. Rob, you look lucky today." If only he knew how right he was. When David and Jennifer arrived to pick me up, I immediately noticed that something was different. They didn't bring the grandchildren. The car had no Christmas decorations. David spoke too fast and avoided my direct gaze. Even so, I got into the SUV confidently, genuinely believing it was anxiety over the surprise they had planned. The trip was strangely quiet. I didn't recognize the route. We left the familiar suburbs of Cleveland and passed through commercial areas I rarely visited. When we stopped in front of Sunset Manor, my stomach dropped. "What are we doing here?" I asked, my voice betraying my growing panic. "Dad, we've already talked about this," David sighed. "You can't live alone anymore. They'll take good care of you here." "We never talked about this." I protested. "You said we were going to celebrate Christmas as a family." "And we will," Jennifer interrupted. "We'll come visit you tomorrow. Look, we even bought you presents to open here. There will be other people your age, activities." The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I couldn't even cry. I just looked at the 2 adults I had raised, educated, and loved unconditionally, and I didn't recognize them. "Please," I whispered, "don't do this to me. I can take care of myself." David checked his watch impatiently. "Everything's already been arranged, Dad. As for the house, Jennifer and I have decided it's best to sell it. The money will cover the costs here." That's when I understood completely. It wasn't about my well-being. It was about the property. About getting rid of the problem, and profiting in the process. While they smiled, thinking they had me perfectly under control, I kept my expression defeated. They didn't realize that I was already mentally cataloging every cruel word, every calculated manipulation. And in my coat pocket, there was something that would change absolutely everything. If you're wondering how this story of family betrayal ends, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because the twist that's coming will turn this cruel abandonment into the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen. The lottery ticket my children didn't know I had was about to give me much more than money. It was going to give me the power to teach them a lesson they would never forget. I got out of the SUV in slow motion, as if I were dreaming a nightmare. The icy December wind cut into my face, but the emotional numbness was much worse than any physical cold. David grabbed my small suitcase from the trunk while Jennifer held my arm, as if afraid I might run away. At the front desk of Sunset Manor, a middle-aged woman smiled with that professional efficiency I recognized from hospitals and funeral homes. "Welcome, Mr. Robb. We've been expecting you," she said, leafing through some papers on her desk. "Your children have already filled out all the paperwork." That's when reality hit me like a slap in the face. They hadn't just planned this, they had filled out the paperwork in advance. This wasn't a last-minute decision motivated by concern. It was a calculated operation. "Dad," David turned to me with that forced smile I'd known since his teenage years, the same one he used when he broke something at home. "Everything is settled. We'll visit you tomorrow morning, we promise. We even brought special Christmas gifts." Jennifer nodded quickly, avoiding direct eye contact. "You'll like it here, Dad. There's bingo on Tuesdays, old movie screenings." I didn't respond. I just watched my two adult children, David 45, vice president of sales at an insurance company, and Jennifer 42, marketing manager at a tech startup, treat me as if I were a business problem they had finally managed to outsource. "Mr. Robb," the employee interjected gently, "how about I show you to your room? Dinner is served at 5:30. David gave me a quick, mechanical hug. Jennifer did the same, whispering, "It's for your own good, Dad." Then they left, returning to the warmth of their SUV, back to their organized lives, leaving me behind like a loose end finally tied up. The employee, who introduced herself as Nancy, led me down a hallway that smelled of disinfectant and institutional food. My room was small, with two narrow beds. One was occupied by an elderly man who was sleeping soundly, snoring softly. "This is your bed, Mr. Robb," Nancy said, pointing to the bed near the window. "If you need anything during the night, just press this red button." When she left, I sat on the edge of the hard bed, still holding my coat. Through the window, I could see the snow beginning to fall harder. It was Christmas Eve, and I was in a nursing home room, sharing space with a stranger, betrayed by his own children. All that night, lying in a bed that wasn't mine, listening to unfamiliar sounds in a place that wasn't my home, I couldn't sleep. I just kept going over the last few months, looking for signs I should have noticed. The sudden visits always happened when I was tending the yard or organizing Margaret's papers. David and Jennifer showed up together more often, always talking about future planning and quality of life. Now I understood that they were doing reconnaissance, assessing my home, my routine, my mental capacity. In fact, they had been meticulously cruel in their execution. For weeks, they planted seeds of doubt about my competence. "Dad, you forgot to lock the front door yesterday," David said on one visit. I was absolutely sure I had locked it, but he insisted so much that I began to question my own memory. "You repeated the same story 3 times at dinner last Sunday," Jennifer added on another occasion. Again, I knew I hadn't done that, but their persistence began to make me doubt myself. What really broke me was realizing that they had used my grief over Margaret's death against me. "Dad, you're not processing Mom's loss properly," Jennifer said during one of her concerned visits. "You're isolating yourself, you're not taking proper care of the house." Absolute lie. I was processing my grief exactly as any normal person would. I had difficult days, of course, but I still paid my bills, kept the house clean, drove without any problems. Margaret and I had always been organized. She left clear instructions on everything from insurance to how to care for the rose bushes in the backyard. But my children constructed a convenient narrative in which I was a widower in mental decline who needed professional help. And the more I protested, the more they pointed to my increasing aggressiveness as evidence of cognitive deterioration. Christmas morning arrived with a heavy silence. I woke up to the sound of the television in the common room. Some residents were gathered there, watching a Christmas Mass broadcast by a Catholic network. I didn't want to join them, but I also couldn't bear to be alone with my thoughts. I dragged myself into the room, trying to look less miserable than I felt. An elderly man with white hair and thick glasses motioned for me to sit next to him on the worn sofa. "First morning here?" he asked in a gentle voice. "I can tell by the look on your face." "I'm Arthur, I've been here for 2 years." I nodded, not trusting my voice. On television, images of happy families celebrating around Christmas trees alternated with commercials for stores announcing post-holiday sales. Each image was like salt in an open wound. "My children promised to come visit me today," I muttered, more to myself than to him. Arthur looked at me with the expression of someone who had seen this story before. "Of course they came. They always come on the first day. It's the next few days that things get complicated." That's when something changed on the TV schedule. "And now, the results of the special Christmas Mega Millions draw," announced a smiling presenter. Instinctively, I reached into the inside pocket of my coat, feeling the crumpled ticket there. I had no real hopes, it was just a momentary distraction. I took out the ticket and smoothed it out as the numbers began to be announced. First ball, 7. I looked at my ticket. It matched. Second, 15. It was there too. Third, 23. Fourth, 32. Fifth, 41. Sixth, 56. My breath caught. I looked at the ticket again, then the screen, then the ticket. Impossible. The winning ticket was sold in Cleveland, Ohio, the presenter continued excitedly. The prize is $320 million. $320 million. Every number on my ticket matched perfectly. Arthur noticed my agitation and looked at the ticket in my trembling hands. "Holy cow," he whispered, checking the numbers on the screen. "Sir, you just won the lottery." As Arthur called Nancy and other employees to verify the ticket, as phones rang and people rushed to confirm its authenticity, I felt a strange calmness come over me. My children thought they were getting rid of a financial burden. They had no idea they had just created the most dangerous adversary of their lives. The timing was so ironic that it seemed like divine script. Abandoned on Christmas Eve, a multimillionaire on Christmas Day. David and Jennifer were about to discover that they had seriously underestimated the man they had created. And in my pocket, that $5 piece of paper was about to become the most powerful tool of justice I could imagine. The next few hours passed like a whirlwind. Nancy called the director of Sunset Manor, who called corporate management, who called their lawyers. Staff appeared out of nowhere, offering coffee, cookies, and smiles that hadn't been there 12 hours earlier. "Mr. Robb," said the director, a short, bald man named Peterson whom I hadn't met yet, "we want to make sure you have all the support you need. We can arrange secure transportation to wherever you want to go, additional protection, anything you need." I looked at him with the same neutral expression I had maintained since my arrival. "Thank you, but I'm fine here for now." Peterson blinked, clearly confused. Men with $320 million didn't usually choose to stay in nursing homes voluntarily. Of course. We just want you to know that your options are unlimited now." Arthur, who had remained by my side throughout the chaos, whispered, "Smart. Let them think you're confused about what to do. It'll give you time to plan." Around 2 in the afternoon, my cell phone started ringing incessantly. David first, then Jennifer. Messages came in every 5 minutes. "Dad, we saw you on TV. It's amazing. We're on our way." "Dad, what wonderful news. Can we talk about next steps?" "Dad, we need to make sure you're getting good advice. Don't make any rash decisions." I didn't respond to any of them. I just watched the numbers pile up on the screen, mentally cataloging the growing tone of desperation disguised as concern. At 3 o'clock, a local news crew arrived. Peterson tried to stop them, but I intervened. "I'd like to give an interview," I announced calmly. "Mr. Robb," Peterson protested, "maybe you should consult a lawyer first." "I am of sound mind," I replied firmly. "And I have something to say." The reporter, a young woman named Amanda Chun from WKYC Cleveland, met me in the living room. She had done her research. She knew about my abandonment at the nursing home less than 24 hours earlier. "Mr. Robb," she began with genuine empathy, "what an extraordinary sequence of events. How are you feeling?" "Ironic," I replied, looking directly into the camera. "Yesterday my children told me I needed specialized care because I could no longer make decisions on my own. Today I discovered that I made one of the best financial decisions of my life by buying that lottery ticket. Amanda immediately realized she had a much bigger story on her hands. Are you saying you were brought here against your will? I was tricked into signing documents to transfer my house while believing I was signing health insurance papers, I explained calmly. My children brought me here on Christmas Eve under the pretext of a family celebration. They said they would sell my house to pay for this institution. Amanda's expression changed from professional curiosity to genuine shock. And your children know about the lottery? Not yet, I replied, allowing a small smile. But I imagine they're watching now. During the interview, I calmly recounted every detail of the betrayal, the increasingly critical visits, the not-so-subtle suggestions about my mental deterioration, the forged documents, the cruel abandonment on Christmas Eve. David, Jennifer, I looked directly into the camera. I hope you enjoyed Christmas Eve at my house. Because things are about to change dramatically. When the interview was over, Amanda gave me her personal card. Mr. Rob, if you need anything at all, call me. This story needs to be told in full. I didn't have to wait long. 40 minutes after the live broadcast, David and Jennifer burst into the nursing home like a hurricane of barely concealed panic. Dad! David exclaimed, his face red with agitation and sweat despite the December chill. What was that interview? Why did you say those horrible things about us on television? Jennifer was visibly shaken, her hands trembling as she tried to appear composed. Dad, people are calling us. Our neighbors, co-workers, everyone saw it. You made us look like monsters. I kept my expression completely neutral. I just reported the facts. Is there anything factually incorrect in what I said? You're twisting everything, David protested, his voice rising an octave. We were worried about you. The house was too big, you were isolated after Mom died. Interesting theory, I interrupted. Then tell me, when exactly did you plan to consult me about this decision? Before or after you tricked me into signing the transfer papers? The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer looked at David. David looked at the floor. Dad, Jennifer finally murmured, can we talk about this at home? As a family. What home would that be, Jennifer? The one you sold without my consent. We haven't sold it yet, David hastened to clarify. We can reverse everything. Look, we obviously made a miscommunication. Miscommunication, I repeated slowly. Is that what you call fraud now? That's when Arthur, who had been discreetly observing the scene from across the room, approached. Excuse me, he said politely, but may I suggest that this conversation continue in a more private setting? Other residents are trying to rest. David ignored him completely, but Jennifer glared at him irritably. Excuse me, who are you? Arthur Morrison, he introduced himself with dignity. I've been living here for 2 years. I've witnessed your father's entire situation since last night. Witnessed what, exactly? David asked aggressively. Arthur smiled calmly. The sudden arrival of a clearly disoriented and betrayed man, abandoned here on Christmas Eve by people he trusted. And I also witnessed his transformation into a man determined to seek justice. Jennifer grimaced. Mr. Arthur, with all due respect, you don't know our family. These are private matters. They were private, I corrected. Until you decided to make them public by abandoning me here. Now they are matters of interest to many people, including my new lawyer. Your lawyer. David gulped. I took a business card from my pocket, one Arthur had lent me from his own lawyer, a specialist in elder law. Michael Goldberg. Specialist in elder fraud and embezzlement. Very experienced in cases involving family manipulation. The color drained completely from my children's faces. Dad, Jennifer whispered, it doesn't have to be this way. We're your family. Family doesn't cheat, I replied, rising from my chair. Family doesn't abandon. Family doesn't steal. I walked toward my bedroom, pausing only to add, you created this situation when you decided I was a disposable obstacle. Now you're going to find out exactly what kind of obstacle a 75-year-old man with $320 million can become. Arthur followed me, leaving David and Jennifer frozen in the living room. Well played, he muttered as we reached the hallway. But I hope you have a real plan, because they won't give up easily. I looked out the hallway window, watching the snow continue to fall on Cleveland. Somewhere in the city, my children were probably regrouping, planning their next strategy to control the situation. "Oh, Arthur," I replied with a smile I hadn't felt in decades, "you have no idea what's about to happen." In my coat pocket, in addition to the lottery ticket that had changed everything, was a small recording I had discreetly made of the conversation I had just had. Further evidence of his attempts at manipulation, this time captured in crystal-clear audio. David and Jennifer thought they knew the father they had raised. They were about to discover that they had seriously underestimated the man he had become. The following Monday, I woke up at 5 in the morning. Not because of insomnia or anxiety, but because I had work to do. While the rest of Sunset Manor was still asleep, I called Michael Goldberg. "Mr. Robb," his voice sounded surprisingly alert for such an early hour. "Arthur told me about your situation. I need to see you today." 2 hours later, Michael arrived at the nursing home with a leather briefcase and a determined expression. He was a man in his 50s, with gray hair, thin-rimmed glasses, and that calm presence that good lawyers cultivate. "First," he said, opening the briefcase on the living room table, "we need to establish your mental capacity. Your children will claim that you weren't in your right mind when you bought the ticket or when you gave that interview." "I've thought of that," I replied, handing him a sealed envelope. "Complete medical report done last week with my cardiologist, Dr. Harrison. All cognitive, physical, and mental tests. Perfect results for my age." Michael examined the documents, his eyebrows rising slightly. "Impressive. You anticipated this move." "Michael, I spent 45 years as a civil engineer. I don't build anything without a solid foundation. And my children have just discovered that they seriously underestimated the structure they tried to demolish." For the next 3 hours, we reviewed every document David and Jennifer had me sign. Michael photographed everything, recorded my detailed statement, and constructed a complete timeline of the manipulation. "It's a classic case of elder fraud," he concluded. "But more sophisticated than usual. They studied techniques of gaslighting, gradual isolation, creating doubt about mental competence. This was planned for months. What now? Now we play chess while they're still playing checkers." Michael explained our strategy in phases. First, a restraining order blocking any sale or transfer of the property. Second, criminal prosecution for fraud and embezzlement. Third, civil suit for emotional distress and compensation. "But Mr. Robb," he paused, "I need to ask about your real intentions. With $320 million, you could just buy a better house and move on. Why seek legal justice?" I stood up and walked to the window, watching other residents in the outdoor courtyard. Some in wheelchairs, others with walkers, all seemingly forgotten by families too busy to care. "Because, Michael, this isn't about me. It's about all the elderly people who have been through similar situations without the resources to defend themselves. My children need to face real consequences, not just temporary embarrassment." He smiled for the first time since he had arrived. "I understand. Then let's build a landmark case." While Michael organized documents, I made my own mental list. There were details about David and Jennifer that they didn't know I knew. Like the fact that David had lied about his financial situation. I found out from a neighbor that he had taken out risky loans to finance a lifestyle he couldn't sustain. Or Jennifer, who had been fired from the tech startup 3 months ago for strategic disagreements, but continued to pretend she had a job to keep up appearances. They weren't just being cruel, they were being desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. On Tuesday, David called 5 times. Jennifer sent 7 messages. All ignored. On Wednesday, they showed up at the nursing home unannounced. "Dad," David was visibly agitated, "we need to talk about your financial plans. That much money requires professional management." "I already have professional management," I replied calmly. "Who?" Jennifer asked with barely concealed urgency. "Competent people." That's when David made his first big mistake. "Look, Dad, we know you're upset with us, but don't be unreasonable. We're your family. Who else is going to look after your interests?" "Interesting question," I replied, taking out my cell phone. "Michael, can you join us? My son David has some questions about financial management." The color drained from their faces when Michael entered the room. Even though it was Tuesday afternoon, He was wearing an impeccable suit and carrying that leather briefcase that had become my symbol of legal protection. "David, Jennifer," Michael said politely, "pleased to meet you at last. Your father has told me so much about you." "And who are you, exactly?" David asked, his voice betraying his nervousness. "Michael Goldberg, specialist in elder law and family fraud. I represent your father in all legal matters related to fraudulent property transfer and abandonment." The silence that followed was so tense you could cut it with a knife. Abandonment. Jennifer tried to laugh, but the sound came out strangled. "We didn't abandon anyone. We brought our father to a specialized home out of genuine concern." "Interesting theory," Michael replied, opening his briefcase. "I have documents here showing that you transferred Mr. Rob's property without informed consent, emptied some of his smaller bank accounts. Yes, we found that out too, and abandoned him here on Christmas Eve without any medical procedure that would justify hospitalization." David and Jennifer exchanged panicked glances. "In addition," Michael continued, "we have recordings of your attempts at intimidation and manipulation since your father's lottery win." "Recordings?" David gulped. I took out my cell phone and played a few seconds of the previous Sunday's conversation. Their own voices echoed in the room. "Dad, don't be unreasonable. We're your family. Who else is going to look after your interests?" "Modern technology," I commented. "Voice-activated recording apps. Very convenient." Jennifer was visibly shaking. "Dad, this is entrapment. You can't record us without permission." "Actually," Michael interjected, "Ohio is a one-party state, meaning that only one participant in the conversation needs to consent to the recording. Your father had every legal right." David tried one last card. "Look, there are obviously misunderstandings. We can resolve this as a family, without lawyers, without courts." "Yes, you can," I replied, standing up. "By returning my house immediately, transferring back all the accounts they touched, apologizing publicly, and agreeing to pay all the legal costs I've already incurred." And, Michael added, "supervised community service in nursing homes for 1 year each." "Community service?" Jennifer protested. "That's humiliating." "No more humiliating than abandoning your elderly father on Christmas Eve," I replied coldly. David tried to approach me, his hands outstretched in a gesture of supplication. "Dad, please. We are family. We've made mistakes, but we can fix this." "Family," I repeated the word slowly. "You know what I've found here at Sunset Manor? Real family. Arthur, who offered me friendship without wanting anything in return. Nancy, who treated me with dignity when you discarded me. Other residents who shared their stories without judgment." I paused, looking directly into both of their eyes. "You two were my biggest disappointments. But you were also my best teachers about what family shouldn't be." As I walked toward my room, I heard Michael explaining the next legal steps. Deadlines, paperwork, potential consequences. Their voices grew fainter as I walked away. In my room, I sat on the bed and looked out the window. The snow had stopped, but the cold remained intense. I thought of Margaret, how proud she would be of the way I handled the situation. She always said I had a strategic mind, but a temperament too gentle for my own good. If you think this story of justice and determination is just beginning, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because the real twist is yet to come, and when David and Jennifer discover the true extent of what I've set in motion, they'll realize they've underestimated not just a father, but a man who has spent decades perfecting the art of building unbreakable structures. Arthur knocked on the door and entered with 2 cups of coffee. "How was the meeting?" he asked, handing me a cup. "Productive," I replied. "Michael is competent. My children are beginning to understand the gravity of the situation." "And you? How are you feeling?" I thought about the question as I sipped my coffee. Determined. For the first time in months, completely determined. In the nightstand drawer, I carefully stored a new recording, this one of the meeting with Michael and my children's accidental confessions. Additional evidence that would be crucial in the coming days. David and Jennifer thought they were facing a confused old man with unexpected luck. They were about to discover that they were facing a retired engineer with 45 years of experience in detailed planning, unlimited financial resources, and for the first time in his life, personal motivation to use both without restraint. The game hadn't just begun. I was already 3 moves ahead, and they didn't even realize that their first pieces had already been removed from the board. The following Thursday, Michael arrived at the nursing home with an expression I hadn't seen before, a mixture of professional admiration and something close to reverential awe. "Rob," he said, sitting down in the chair next to me, "we've achieved much more than we expected. Much more. In the last 72 hours, our investigation had unearthed a network of questionable activities that went beyond what David and Jennifer had done to me. Michael discovered that they had used similar techniques with other family members over the past 5 years. Your cousin Harold in Phoenix," Michael explained, opening a thick folder. 82 years old, early dementia. David convinced the family that Harold needed to sign some insurance papers, but he actually transferred Harold's property to an LLC that Jennifer manages. I felt my stomach churn. Harold was always kind to me when we were kids. And your Aunt Dolores in Tampa. Jennifer offered to help with finances after she broke her hip. 3 months later, Dolores was in a public nursing home while her $200,000 house was sold to cover medical costs. The magnitude of the operation left me speechless. These weren't just greedy children, they were systematic predators targeting vulnerable elderly members of their own family. "Michael," I said slowly, "this changes everything. It's no longer about my personal revenge. It's about protecting other people." He nodded gravely. "Exactly. And that's why I need to tell you what we found out last night." Michael opened his laptop and showed me a series of emails between David and Jennifer from the last 3 months. Detailed conversations about maximizing the return on their parental investment, dividing up the recovered assets, and plans to expand their operations to other states. "They have a list," Michael said, pointing to an Excel file on the screen. 17 elderly people in 6 different states. Distant relatives, family acquaintances, former co-workers. All with valuable properties and family situations that allow for manipulation. As I processed the information, Michael received a call. He spoke quickly in a low voice, then hung up with a grim expression. "That was my private investigator. David just showed up at your bank, trying to access an account you supposedly authorized yesterday." "What account?" "A ghost account they created using your name and social security number. With a forged power of attorney dated 2 months ago, before your mental deterioration. They don't know that winning the lottery automatically invalidated any previous power of attorney." I felt a cold fury rising within me. They're trying to steal the lottery money. Worse. They're trying to prove that you were mentally incapacitated when you gave that television interview. If they gained access to the ghost account, they would argue that your confusion about finances proves mental incapacity. At that moment, I realized that David and Jennifer hadn't just betrayed me, they had built an elaborate scheme to defraud the elderly that had been going on for years. And now they were desperate to keep it going. "Michael, is it time to put our plan into action?" "It's past time. It's now or never." Over the next hour, Michael made a series of calls while I watched from the window. The FBI to report interstate fraud. The State Attorney General's office about family organized crime. The IRS about tax evasion. Each call added another layer to the web we were weaving around my children. But the most important call was to Cleveland Scene, the region's largest investigative newspaper. "Amanda Chun," answered the reporter who had interviewed me. "Amanda, this is Rob Thompson. Do you have a few minutes to hear about a story that will win you journalism awards?" 30 minutes later, Amanda was at the nursing home with a photographer and recording equipment. Michael had organized everything down to the smallest detail, authenticated documents, verified timelines, irrefutable evidence. "Mr. Robb," Amanda said after reviewing the material, "this is the biggest family fraud operation I've ever documented. 17 victims, over $2 million in stolen property. And it's happening right now," I added. "As we speak, my children are trying to access fraudulent accounts using my name." Amanda looked at Michael. "Do you have the bank evidence?" "All digital, all time-stamped. And we have something else." Michael played a recording on his phone. David's voice echoed clearly. "Jennifer, if we can prove the old man is confused about money, we can get the TV interview overturned and argue mental incapacity for the lottery too." "Where did you get this?" Amanda asked. "David's car phone. Technically, it's owned by the company he works for, so we don't need a warrant to record it." Amanda smiled for the first time since she arrived. Mr. Robb, can I broadcast this story tonight? You can. But I want to add something. Over the next few minutes, I explained my plan to use the lottery money to create a foundation to protect the elderly. Free legal resources, investigation of family fraud, support for victims. My children thought they were stealing from a confused man, I concluded, looking directly at the camera. In fact, they were creating the funding to end exactly the kind of crime they commit. The story aired at 6 o'clock that evening. Around 6:15, my cell phone started ringing incessantly. First David, then Jennifer, then unknown numbers that were probably lawyers they had hastily hired. I let them all go to voicemail. At 6:30, Arthur ran into my room. Rob, you need to see this. Now. In the living room, dozens of residents were gathered around the television. On the screen, David and Jennifer were being led away in handcuffs from their respective homes by FBI agents. Arrested on charges of interstate fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy to commit crimes against the elderly, the reporter narrated live. The operation expanded to 6 states after complaints that began with a family abandonment case we reported on this week. As I watched my children being put into police cars, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that justice was being served, sadness that we had reached this point. Arthur approached and put his hand on my shoulder. How are you feeling? Relieved, I replied honestly. For the first time in months, completely relieved. On the screen, the camera focused on David's house, my former home, as agents carried boxes of evidence. The property was sealed with yellow tape, but I knew that in a few days it would officially be back in my name. Michael appeared at my side, slightly out of breath. Rob, I just got a call from the federal prosecutor's office. They want your full cooperation. In exchange, they're offering complete immunity and witness protection if necessary. What about the others? Harold, Dolores, the other victims. Full property recovery, plus punitive damages. We're talking complete restitution for all 17 victims. That night, as the nursing home finally quieted down, I sat on the edge of my bed processing the day's events. In less than a week, I had gone from being an abandoned senior citizen to the catalyst for a federal fraud crackdown. My cell phone vibrated with a message from Amanda Chun. Mr. Robb, 3 other families have already come forward reporting similar situations. Your courage is inspiring others to speak up. I replied, this is just the beginning. Arthur knocked softly on the door and entered with 2 cups of tea. For the man who declared war on family fraud, he said, handing me a cup. We laughed together, but it was a laugh laden with meaning. In 7 days, my life had been turned upside down and then rebuilt in a way I had never imagined. David and Jennifer thought they were dealing with a confused and vulnerable father. They discovered they were dealing with a retired engineer who had spent 45 years building unbreakable structures. And when they applied that same systematic mindset to the pursuit of justice, the results were devastating. In the drawer of my nightstand, I carefully stored the first documents of the Thompson Foundation for the Protection of the Elderly. I had already received calls from specialist lawyers wanting to contribute, from former victims offering testimonies, and from experienced investigators willing to work pro bono. What had started as personal revenge was turning into something much bigger. David and Jennifer had not only lost their freedom, they had unwittingly created the catalyst for a revolution in the legal protection of the elderly. And all because they had seriously underestimated what a determined man with unlimited resources and a just cause could accomplish. The game had not only ended in my victory. It had turned into something that would continue to impact lives long after I left this world. 6 months later, I sat on the bench in federal court watching the judge read the final sentence. David, 12 years in federal prison. Jennifer, 10 years. Full restitution for all 17 victims, plus punitive damages totaling $4.2 million. The defendants' actions, the judge declared, represent one of the most systematic family fraud operations this court has ever prosecuted. The deliberate targeting of vulnerable seniors is particularly despicable. When I left the courthouse, I found Arthur waiting in the Cadillac he had bought the week before, my gift to the man who had become my best friend. How do you feel? He asked as we drove back downtown. Complete, I answered honestly. The Thompson Foundation for the Protection of the Elderly had become a national operation. 16 offices in 12 states, 43 specialized attorneys, and a 24-hour hotline that had already helped over 300 families. Michael now ran our legal division while maintaining his private practice. Amanda Chun had won a Pulitzer Prize for her investigative series on family fraud that began with my story. 3 weeks ago, I received a handwritten letter from David in prison. 2 pages of apologies, regret, and pleas for forgiveness. I replied with a single sentence: use this time to figure out who you really want to be. I didn't send it out of cruelty, but out of genuine hope. Some people need to lose everything to find their humanity. Last Thursday, I officially moved back into my old house. Every room had been restored exactly as Margaret had left it. In the backyard, I planted a memorial garden for all victims of family fraud, 17 different rose bushes, each representing a life that was almost destroyed. Today is Christmas Eve again. Arthur and I are having dinner at Sunset Manor with other residents who have become my chosen family. Nancy is being promoted to managing director next week. As I check the latest emails from the foundation, I smile reading reports of victories. A lady in Oregon regained her farm, a man in Texas exposed children who were stealing his retirement, an entire family in Michigan now properly cares for their 90-year-old matriarch. If this story of transformation and justice has inspired you to never give up, even when all seems lost, subscribe to the channel to discover how others have found strength in the most desperate situations. Because sometimes, our greatest betrayal becomes our greatest opportunity. David and Jennifer thought they were discarding a burden. In fact, they created the catalyst for a revolution that continues to protect thousands of seniors across the country. The last I heard, they were serving time in different federal prisons. Me? Well, I just signed contracts to expand our foundation internationally. Who would have thought that a lottery ticket forgotten in the pocket of an old coat would become the seed of America's largest safety net for the elderly? The sweetest revenge is not to destroy those who have hurt us. It is to build something so extraordinary that our pain is transformed into a purpose that transcends generations.